Welcome to the History in Pixels channel. Be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more videos like this one. Lai Key Yates, daughter of a Laguna Pueblo chief, was photographed around 1905. The Kiowa attire with belt and bead necklaces marks ceremonial identities. The scene is set in the semi-arid west-central region of New Mexico near Albuquerque, when railroads were beginning to integrate markets and cultures. An image from 1908 attributed to Roland Reed shows a woman of the Ojibwe people. At the turn of the 20th century, Ojibwe communities lived among the Great Lakes with seasonal cycles of fishing and gathering, birch bark and beadwork arts. The photograph points to cultural continuity and the encounter with the technical modernity of the time. Don't forget to subscribe and comment where you're watching from. Carl Wurz's photograph, made in 1900 in Arizona, shows two young by the window. The rolled hairstyle indicates youth and social roles. At the turn of the century, villages on the mesas of the Colorado Plateau received artists, traders, and travelers. Their gazes follow that approaching world. An 1878 image at Fort Kiowa in the Montana Territory with a Cheyenne woman. The fort, established after Little Bighorn 1876 under Nelson Miles's campaign, anchored the Army's presence on the plains. In this setting, the Cheyenne and Algonquian-speaking people allied with the Lakota and Arapaho faced displacement and sought to maintain traditions. The scene presents Carlawa Chiwi and her daughters Maria and Felicit Tura, women of Isleta Pueblo. Made in the early 20th century and attributed to Polly. It is set in the U.S. Southwest when New Mexico was transitioning from territory to statehood in 1912. The framing highlights kinship and female presence in Kiowa community life. Image of young Hopi from Sichomovi on First Mesa, Arizona. Made by Frederick Monson in the first decades of the 20th century. The girls wear ceremonial attire tied to the agricultural cycle and village celebrations. The scene is set in a period of change in the Southwest, evidencing cultural continuities. A scene from 1895 shows a young woman of Taos Pueblo in present-day New Mexico. Between adobe walls, signs of daily tasks combined with the long history of the Pueblo, inhabited for centuries by Kiowa-speaking peoples, a crossroads of trade routes in the upper Rio Grande since pre-colonial times. Its multi-story houses reflect communal architecture. In the 1892 image, one observes a young Kiowa woman in an everyday moment alongside the community. The garments with beads and textiles adopted in the period indicate exchanges with settlers and plains trade. The focused gaze and the adornments reveal youthful roles and ritual practices that sustained Kiowa life at the end of the 19th century. In the image, one sees a woman of the Spoken Nation photographed in 1897 by Frank LaRoche. Her clothing and accessories reflect practices of the Columbia Plateau. The moment captures a period of intense change in the Pacific Northwest when railroads and new economies were asserting themselves, but community life maintained rituals, beadwork, and basketry. A photograph from 1904 in present-day New Mexico shows the Corn Maiden, a mythic figure among the Pueblo peoples. At the turn of the 20th century, the scene underscores the centrality of corn, daily food, guide to the agricultural calendar, and ritual offering. The image illuminates ties between myths, labor, and community life in the Southwest. In 1900, Carl Everton Moon began a photographic project visiting Native American communities in their homelands. He sought to preserve ways of life, rituals, landscapes, and histories at the turn of the 20th century when westward expansion and new frontiers were rapidly altering the daily lives of these peoples. A woman of the Taos Pueblo people photographed in the 1880s in the territory of New Mexico. The scene allows us to observe dark wool clothing, a shawl over the shoulders, turquoise necklaces, and traditional hairstyle. In the background, adobe houses indicate the communal role. The expression suggests a daily life marked by rituals, trade, and agricultural seasonality. In the 1880s, Marcia Pascal stood out as a woman of Cherokee descent, daughter of George Pascal, an officer in the U.S. Army. Her trajectory crosses the post-Civil War phase when westward expansion, railroads, and new legal frontiers were altering life in the Indian Territory and in mixed communities. In 1894, a Kiowa woman from the Southern Plains lives in what was then the Indian Territory, today Oklahoma. After the Plains Wars and the imposition of boundaries, her community faces economic and spiritual changes that strain ceremonies, language, and family roles previously reinforced by regional alliances. Year 1900, United States. A young Indigenous woman appears in ceremonial dress of her nation. This scene is set at the turn of the 20th century, when Native communities face territorial losses and redefinitions of autonomy. The clothing and adornments affirm collective bonds and cultural continuity in the face of rapid transformations. A photograph from 1899 made by Frank Reinhardt presents Hattie Tom, an Apache woman. The scene is set at the end of the 19th century, a phase of reconfiguration of the American West and of the assertion of Indigenous identities under new civil powers. The framing and the adornments indicate cultural choices and ways of presenting oneself to the world. Elsie Vance's chest twin connected to the Cherokee is inserted into the Apache history of the Southwest at the end of the 19th century. Amid military campaigns and displacement, the clans preserved kinship, alliances, and subsistence routes. The name evokes memories of imprisonment, removals, and contact with army posts on the U.S.-Mexico border. In the image in 1886, Lizzie Longwolf performs in Buffalo Bill's show, part of the Wild West tours that shaped public memory of the frontier. Her participation shows how these shows brought together equestrian demonstrations, exhibition shooting, and choreographies to sell the public a narrative of the West. Made in 1895, the image presents a young Hopi woman of the Pueblo people who live on the mesas of Arizona. The clothing and adornments indicate family belonging and life stage. At the end of the 19th century, contacts with railroads, merchants, and scholars were growing while seasonal ceremonies continued to mark the community calendar. In 1899, Frank Reinhardt photographed Hattie Tom, a Cherokee Apache woman. The image made in the context of the final ethnographic interest allows one to observe adornments, hairstyle, and textiles that reveal the group's techniques and identities. Her serene posture echoes memories of displacement and alliances after the Apache Wars. The 1886 image shows Isabel Perico Njati, a Cherokee Apache woman held as a prisoner of war. The setting evokes the end of the campaigns in the U.S. Southwest when the capture of Apache groups accompanied the surrender of Geronimo. Her presence underscores the effects of military advance and territorial occupation on Indigenous peoples. Dated around 1900, the image shows Alice, possibly connected to the Cayuse, Walla Walla, or Umatilla peoples of the Columbia Plateau. Facial features, attire, and adornments suggest cultural affiliation. The period was marked by treaties, displacement, and territorial reconfigurations in the Pacific Northwest. Dated 1885, the image shows a young Comanche woman. Her hairstyle, the beads, and the textile indicate craft practices and commercial contact in the southern Great Plains. The period follows the decline of the bison and settlement in bounded territories, a context that altered mobility, clothing, and modes of subsistence. Dated 1900, the image shows a young woman on her wedding day. The setting underscores rites that joined families and clans in the villages of the Arizona Plateau. The woven garments and shell and turquoise adornments express inherited crafts, while the hairstyle and the textiles offered mark the passage into adulthood and the continuity of the community. In the 1886 image, Julie Nelson is glimpsed dressed according to the social codes of the late 19th century. The attire, hair arrangement, and posture reflect expectations of respectability amid urbanization and industrial expansion. The look and the pose suggest control and self-awareness before the camera of the period. In 1895, George A. Addison paints Amy and Carrie Kiowa, placing two figures on Kiowa Island off the coast of South Carolina. In the post-Reconstruction era, when barrier islands connected fishing and cotton, the scene highlights clothing, posture, and objects linking local lives to tides and coastal commerce in an attentive look at materiality and environment. In the 1880s, young Comanche women stood out as central agents of collective life, responsible for preparing food, setting up and leading camps, working leather, and managing exchanges. They sustained mobile economic networks tied to buffalo hunting and regional trade. They transmitted languages, songs, and rituals articulating kinship and alliances. Their actions shaped cultural continuities in a period of rapid change on the plains.